In anime, a group of people who have really cool designs and powers that the main characters of the series have to eventually face off against is really cool. I mean, Naruto has the Akatsuki, My Hero had the League of Villains, and so on and so forth. This means that One Piece and Bleach are no different, and in Bleach we've had a few groups that Ichigo and his gang had to face off against, but the one group that everybody loves to bring up time and time again is the Espada, and in my honest opinion, I do believe that they were the coolest group. And in One Piece we also have a set of characters that you either love or hate, and they're the Admirals, and as you can tell by the title of thumbnail, I'm going to be putting these two up against each other to see who is stronger. So strap in, because I'm going to get real in depth with this video. But before I get into the video, if you guys enjoy content like this, you know what to do, hit that like button and subscribe, as I do post content like this regularly, and to be honest, it's a win-win. You guys show me love and support, and I give it back to you in the form of videos. Whether it's Bleach, other anime, or just fiction in general, then do try to plan on covering it, so be there when I go there. But I feel like I've rambled on enough. Why don't I jump straight into the video and see who is stronger between the Admirals of One Piece or the Espada of Bleach. Before I jump into any scaling inside this video, I'm going to need to cover the rules section so you guys know what I'm doing this by. Now the first rule is going to cover who's going to be inside the video. I'm going to be using the Aronka versions of the Espada, and then for the Admirals, I'm going to use Akainu, Aokiji, Kizaru, Fujitora, and Green Bull in this video. Second rule is that certain special hacks that only work inside their series won't apply here, so that means that spiritual pressure won't be applied here, and the exact same thing with Logias not being able to be hit, that thing won't be here, so yeah, they'll be able to hit each other and obviously see each other. The third rule will be how they're going to be fighting, and they're going to be fighting all as a group, but just know that they're going to be fighting bloodlusted in a way, so yes, they're going to be trying to take the other side out. And finally, this is going to happen in Wako Mundo because it's probably the best place for them to fight, since it's just an open place where they can just all use their powers. So with that being said, why don't I get straight into the scaling. To begin the scaling, I'm going to go over the Espada. Now quick little disclaimer, I'm not going to go into each of their scaling individually. I'm going to basically set a bare minimum, and then with the highest where they should be at, and then in the hack section I'm going to cover their abilities and the ones that are going to be useful for this battle. So when I jump straight into their AP, and for their AP they're going to be at least small country level to then multi-continental. It's capped that La Noches is around a small country in terms of size, and every Espada with the Gran Rey Zero could destroy it. Now for the multi-continental scaling, I personally get from Ukihara being able to obviously stack his Zeros and obviously go higher and higher and higher in terms of AP, meaning the people that are stronger than him inside of the Espada should be able to do it as well. But I do believe that the ones below him should be able to, like people like Grimjaw and whatnot, but that's up to you to decide that. I'm not really going to be bothered on that, since I don't believe it will change much inside this fight. And so next up we have speed, and speed inside the Bleach is extremely contentious, as a lot of people do believe that they're either hypersonic or faster than light, and due to Zero being called light, I'm gonna say that they're at least FTO to MFTO in terms of speed. So moving on from that, we're going to go over their durability, and just like their AP, it's going to be small country level to multi-continental in terms of durability. And unless they have shown more defensive capabilities than their AP, then I'm just going to say that their AP should be equal to their durability. So to pair up with their durability, we have their endurance, and all of them should be able to fight for long periods of time and withstand a lot of damage. So yeah, their endurance is really good. And so before we jump into their hacks, I'm going to go over their battle IQ. Now some of these guys are either really smart or they're kind of in this category, since some of them are extremely smart but then they have moments where they're kind of dumb, but most of them do have a high battle IQ, and I feel like working as a team they'll be kind of okay, but I do know that their personalities may clash. But for the most part inside a battle, these guys are extremely intelligent, so that is something that we're gonna have to keep in for the battle later. Since there are so many of these guys, tend to be exact, I'm going to start off with what they all should share in common, and then I'm obviously going to explain their abilities separately. They all have spiritual energy, the Zero, Gran Rey Zero, and Zero Kuras, and they also have their Zampa Toes and Resurrections. Also, a quick little disclaimer here, I haven't watched the Bleach anime in time, so my pronunciation of some of these names and whatnot is going to be a little bit off, but just bear with me. Anyway, let's get straight back into the video. They always have their hero technique, which is like Tekai from One Piece. Oh, and Sonido. And Sonido was like Shade for One Piece. So I feel like at this point I've covered all the abilities that they share. So why don't I get into their individual hacks. And so starting off, we're going to go over Aranero, who is the weakest. He can obviously absorb hollows and merge himself with things, and we get to see his abilities up against Rukia. And that's where he showcases that he can use other people's powers as well, obviously Shiba being the one in this case. So now his Resurrection turns his body into whatever the hell this is, and he's able to use the abilities of the hollows he once swallowed before. And at this point, he'll be able to use all the powers that he's collected before. Now, one thing I do want to add that's going to be a massive drawback for him is once he removes his mask, he's going to be exposed and he's going to be revealed in his little tank. And if you're able to break it, then he's pretty much finished. So with that being said, why not I move into number 8, and that's Granz. Granz is a master inventor, but since we're not going to be in La Noches, most of his traps won't work here, but he'll be able to use all of his weapon type inventions. Granz has a few busted abilities, but I think the one that will make this fight very interesting is his ability to analyze your move and then fully nullify it once he understands it. This is going to be very interesting, as I don't know if he'll be able to analyze Haki as it's not of his world, but their devil fruits will definitely be able to be analyzed, so that's something to look out for. In his Resurrection form, he's able to make copies of you, but that's if the stuff that he emits touches you. He can protect himself in a ball, and he can also make a voodoo doll of you like how Hawkins does, but he can obviously pull the stuff out of you manually. This will only matter to you if he touches you with one of his weird little tentacles, and you can put yourself back together if it comes down to it. And I won't be including his hell powers since this is only going to be a Ronka version of him, so why not I just cover all the rest of his abilities that he does have. And he only has one final ability, and that is the ability to resurrect himself by spawning himself inside of you and obviously spurting out. And this all stems from him being able to touch you, so essentially you don't want to be touched by this guy, as if you're touched by him, a lot of his abilities are going to trigger. Granz does have a massive weakness, and that's his lack of raw fighting skills, but I feel like with that being said, I've said everything that I need to say about him, so why not I move into number 7, and that's Lerox. As of to begin his section, he does have an advanced version of Sonaido that allows him to create clones of himself that like after images, but they can actually attack you, and they bleed too. And so his Resurrection allows him to spawn a bunch of eyes on his body, and those eyes are able to control objects. Now if those objects hit a limb, they basically disable the connection to your brain, so you basically don't want to get hit by any of the objects that he sends your way. And he can also just use his lower body to protect himself, but at that point he's not allowed to use any of his 58 eyes, so it's basically a defensive move that puts him in a fully defensive spot. Now if one of the objects he's hitting hits your head, then you're pretty much done for, since he can then control the whole of your body. But don't worry, he does have a massive weakness, and his weakness is destroying all 58 of his eyes, since if you do that, well, he has nothing to control things with, so he's done. And so with that being said, I feel like we've said everything we need to say about him, so why don't we move on to the coolest, Espada. So up next we have Grimmjow, and Grimmjow's techniques are very simple, as he's a very hands-on fighter, so I'll basically just jump straight into his Resurrection that doesn't have any crazy hacks abilities, but he can shoot bombs, and he can also use a long-range claw type of move. As you can see, he's very basic when it comes down to it, so there's not really much I can say here. His weakness is definitely his attitude more than his actual abilities, so why don't we just move on to the 5th spot, and that's Gilga. Amongst his peers, Gilga has the strongest yellow, meaning that he does have the best durability out of all of them, and you could argue that it could be above his AP like I was talking about earlier. Now his Resurrection allows him to regenerate himself really quickly, spawn scythes, and have 6 arms, making him extremely deadly and annoying to go up against. And just like every other Resurrection, his stats do increase. Now I would say his main weakness is that his regeneration is capped, so if you're able to deal enough damage, he can definitely go down. So with that being said, I feel like I covered everything I need to cover about Gilga, so why don't we move on to every edgy kid's wet dream, and that's Ukihara. Now just like Gilga, Ukihara has extremely good regeneration, but if his head is damaged or internal organs are damaged, he just can't fix them. And he does need a little bit of time to obviously gather up the spiritual energy to then regenerate his wounds, but it shouldn't be that slow. Now unlike everybody else, since Ukihara is a little bit different, he does have stages to his Resurrection, so why don't we go over them. To be honest, both versions I can just sum up here. Essentially in his first form it allows us to create a green javelin, and in the second one it's basically the javelin but better, and it's basically like an arrow now. As you can tell from the last few, they just get stronger overall and get like new little niche attacks. They're not really the biggest thing ever like the ones at the bottom, but essentially he just gets more damage and different energy beam based attacks. Only you can use his tail now, so why don't we get into every Gooner's wet dream, and that's Haribo. For Harry, but I'm going to go straight into Resurrection since she just has the exact same qualities as the guys below her, aside from the healing of course. Now Resurrection mainly includes water, and she uses it in very interesting ways. She's able to obviously cut things with it, she's able to slice things with water really quickly, and she's also able to boil it, allowing it to even escape ice. And she can also just flood places if need be. So with that being said, I feel like I've covered everything I need to cover about her, so when I move into the second ranked Espada member, and that's Baragan. Now unlike the last few Espada members, he does have abilities that we do need to cover, so I'm going to get into them really quickly. He has his time dilation field that allows him to slow down time for the person he's fighting, allowing him to move at regular speed to gain the upper hand. He can also age people up by touching them, so getting out of his reach is pretty necessary. Now when he activates his Resurrection, this aging ability basically surrounds him, so close quarter fighters are his best friend. It comes out through the black mist that he oozes. Also, he does wield an axe, which is different from a lot of them, since a lot of them just like wielding swords. Obviously Gilga likes using a scythe, but this guy likes using the axe, but the rest of them just like using their swords. Now Baragan can be affected by his own aging ability, since he's usually protected from it. So I'm assuming if you're able to obviously crack whatever's protecting him, or just allow it to enter his body, then yeah, he's pretty much done as well. So with that being said, why don't I get into the first Espada, and that's Stark. Now for the Stark section, I'm going to start off with how he uses his Cero. Now usually when you fire your Cero, you have to be in a sort of stance to activate and then fire it, but he can just shoot his whenever he wants, making this basically unreadable. Oh, and he also has his counterpart, which is basically himself, and that's Lily Nat. She's extremely crucial to his Resurrection, as when they come back together as a full person, that activates their full power, and they're also able to fire with each other. She turns into the guns, and obviously he's still in his main body. And his Resurrection abilities are very simple. He can spam his Cero, create swords, and create a pack of wolves to attack you. Now Stark's main weakness is himself. Well, technically it's Lily, but it's himself. Essentially, if you kill Lily, then he's going back to half power, and then yeah, you can just finish him off from there. And I think if you're able to kill Lily before he enters his Resurrection form, he can't enter it, so yeah, he's done from there on in. Also, as we saw inside the manga, he does lose his will to fight, so I'm assuming if you take Lily out, he's just gonna stop fighting you there and then. So I'd say if you're gonna fight him, aim straight for Lily. So with that being said, when I move to the strongest Espada, and that's Yami. Now pre-release Yami is actually the weakest, but when he's going at his max power, he's the strongest. Now his first move is Gonzui, but I don't know if it's going to be used here, since even if you do believe that the Admiral should be able to be affected by the spiritual pressure, these guys take on some of the strongest conquerors inside the One Piece verse on a daily basis, so I doubt it's really going to affect them. And so with that being said, he basically is just the Hulk. And that's just the best way for me to explain him. He goes bigger and he goes stronger the angrier he gets. This includes his Resurrection, and at a certain level he's going to be able to regenerate his wounds, so basically you have to stop him from getting as mad as possible. But with that being said, I feel like aside from Bala, which is just a faster but weaker Cero, there isn't much for me to cover, so why don't I get into the Admirals from One Piece. Now I've covered One Piece scaling on this channel a lot, so I'm going to shoot through this quickly since the scaling I have right now is extremely concrete. To begin, I'm going to start off with their AP, and at the bare minimum they're all going to be multi-continental, as characters like Don Chinjao are able to destroy ice continents, and Aokiji, a character that is inside this video, was able to create one with pure ease. And so realistically, when they're all going all out, they should be at least multi-continental. Now when we move on to their speed, the highest tier of One Piece characters are all MFTO plus at bare minimum, since light isn't something that they even bothered about, and it's something that they've just surpassed entirely. Next is their durability, and it's going to be the exact same as their AP, which is multi-continental, as they're able to take attacks from characters on their level. These guys are for people who are above Don Chinjao's level and come out on top, so this is extremely acceptable for their durability scaling. And so to pair out with their amazing durability, we have their endurance, and these guys are monsters in this category, as they're able to fight for prolonged periods of time, and their abilities allow them to just fight for that long. They can also endure massive attacks and just keep going, so yeah, I'm gonna get more into why they can fight for so long in the hack section, but why don't we get into their battle IQ before we go there. Now in terms of battle IQ, these guys are undeniably great, since they have to lead armies into war, and Aside from that, when you see them fight, they're just extremely smart and know how to handle themselves while in combat, and they all do have the ability to work together, so why not I jump straight into their hacks. And so just like the Espada, I'm going to go over the hacks that they all should share and then go into their individual abilities. So they should all have Haki, and they're gonna have the advanced version of Armament Haki and Observation Haki. Armament Haki is like an armor that you can use defensively and offensively, and you can use to nullify abilities, but this isn't one piece, so this isn't going to apply here. Next we have Advanced Armament, and you have Emission and Internal Destruction. Personally, I don't believe there's a reason why they shouldn't have Internal Destruction, as they've used Emission Haki, and Internal Destruction should be extremely useful and just common amongst top tiers, so I'm going to say they have Internal Destruction as well. Now, Emission Haki allows you to hit people without touching them and can make you defend yourself without things touching you, and the best showcase of this being used defensively does come from the Admirals inside the Marineford. Next is the Observation Haki, and it's basically just like their Spidey sense. Then they have Future Sight, which is the advanced version of it. And then you have whatever Fujitora has, but it's basically a way to just get around him being blinded and being able to sense people and whatnot. You can then even sense the clouds and things that are way up in the sky, so as you can tell, his radius of how far he can see has been enhanced even after blinding himself. So with that being said, I feel like this is where the similarities end, and this is where I'm going to have to go into the individual devil fruits that they do have. First off, I'm going to start off with Green Bull, and Green Bull has a plant-based Logia that allows him to control and create plants and shoot vines and whatnot from his body, allowing him to create his own forest. With these vines, he can also stick them in you and suck the nutrients out of you, allowing himself to obviously heal himself back up to max HP, and while he can obviously heal himself, he can also respawn himself if his forest does get burnt down or just something happens, basically allowing him to stay in the fight for a long period of time. He's also made a mode where he can be resistant to fire, so I feel like with that being said, I've covered everything I need to cover with Green Bull, so why don't I move straight into Fujitora. Fujitora is a gravity user who can do anything related to gravity. So that means if he wants to put a lot of weight on you or make you have zero gravity, he can do just that. And due to him being able to control gravity, he's able to summon meteors from space. And one thing we do know is that it doesn't really have a limit since it hasn't been staying inside the story, so if he wants to drop the moon on you, he can do it. Now, one thing I will say is that out of everybody here, he does have the least amount of recovery powers, but it's fine, he'll be okay. So with that being said, I feel like I've covered everything I need to cover with Fujitora, so why don't I move straight into our favourite Light Man. Kizaru is made out of light, so everything that light can do, he can do. And he can even speed himself up past light, and he seems to be invulnerable to everything light. He can obviously make himself into a pure version of light, and he's able to make clones of himself, rain down many bullets of light, create light swords, and just many other things. Kizaru is extremely versatile and will be a massive help in the fight. But why not I just not spoil anything about the fight and move into our favorite Iceman. And as I just said, Aokiji is made out of ice, meaning he can turn anything into ice. He can freeze continents over with ease. He can then obviously freeze you down to the bone with just a touch, and he's then able to change the climate of an island just by fighting there. Just like Green Bull, he's able to just spawn out of his ice randomly, meaning he should be able to make ice clones, but I'm not going to say if he can 100% do it. It's a possibility, but I'm not going to say yes. I'm not going to basically give him it in this fight. But I feel like I've covered everything I need to cover with Aokiji. If there's anything else, I'll include it in the fight. So why don't we get into our final man, and that's Akainu. Sakazuki is a magma man that allows him to have extremely high attack potency. Sakazuki can do things like shoot magma into the air and then rain it down everywhere. He can then create magma balls, and he can control his body however he feels like it, just like everybody else with Alokia. Sakazuki can also change the climate around him, just like Aokiji. And the last thing I'm going to add for all of them is that they are weak to seawater. As they're very resourceful, they do have their ways around it. So if there are any remaining hacks I need to add, I'll add it throughout the fight. But why don't I just jump straight into the versus battle, as I've covered everything I need to cover. So let's finally find out who is stronger between the Espada and the Admirals. Now, I'm just going to put it bluntly for you guys. The fight comes down to a few abilities on each team. Baragan and Grand are going to be the Espada's main people for winning them the fight due to their hacks based abilities, while on the Admiral side, their Future Sight and Kizaru are going to be the people that are going to keep them in the fight. Oh, Green Bull too as well, since he can just survive a lot of attacks. Now you may be thinking, why isn't it the strongest that are going to change the fight? Like, why aren't Sakazuki and Yami going to change the fight? Now, to be honest, Yami is kind of like a sitting duck. Like, he would lose pretty easily to the Admirals, mainly because of Green Bull. Green Bull can just suck all the nutrients out of him and he's going to be a husk. Granz and Baragan have the ability to take an Admiral out of the fight straight away. So, if they are able to take somebody out like Fujitora or whatnot, then that is going to be a massive help on their end. But then again, one person they do not want to go up against is Kizaru, and it's gonna be extremely likely that they're gonna fight him. See, if they're actually going to be using their brains here, Kizaru can just make a bunch of clones, and as you can tell where I'm going with this, finding out their abilities is going to be pivotal for the Admirals. And even if they don't find out their abilities, they have their future sight, meaning if they're hit by any of them, they're gonna know what happens when they're hit by them. Also, abilities like the Cero are just going to be nullified here as well. The attack is, I mean, aside from Stark, and they're going to be able to see Stark's attack before it comes, they're not going to be landing it, and Kizaru can just intercept that if he needs to. And so it just comes down to who is going to make the first move. And personally, if Kizaru is actually on point and Sakazuki's commanding it, then yeah, I do believe that he's going to use a bunch of his clones to intercept them, and they can just take on whoever they really want to take on. Baragan, once his abilities figured out, nobody's going to fight him aside from Kizaru, and you can't slow down Light. That is just something that you just can't slow down. And you have to remember that Kizaru's clones aren't Kizaru. Like, they, either way, like, Kizaru's made out of light, so his clones will be made out of light, and his clones won't be affected by the aging. So Baragan is going to be out of the fight, especially because he can obviously speed himself up, and he's not going to be able to take that. Yami is going to be hard countered by Green Bull, and the rest of them, although they're around their level, it's just Future Sight. Future Sight is way too potent, and Ukihara is going to try to do a few things. They have internal destruction that defeats him. There are a few things that the Espada can do, but fight has leaned in the Admiral's favor heavily, and it's kind of weird how one of the weaker Espada is probably going to be the one that would even be able to win them the fight. Granz, if he's able to study obviously their light abilities and whatnot, then yeah, then he can obviously make a counter for it and he won't be able to be damaged by them. But then again, Haki is something that I don't know if he's going to be able to register and obviously be able to say, okay, I can counter this. So yeah, at the end of the day, I do believe that Admirals do win, and that is mainly due to Kizaru and Green Bull's help along with their Future Sight. And if Fujitora really wants to be petty, he can just nuke the whole place if they're about to lose. So yeah, with that being said, why don't we move into the conclusion of this video. So yeah, in conclusion, Kizaru gets them the dub. I tried to figure out as many ways for the Espada to win, but when you consider that Kizaru has clones and the rest of them could possibly make clones, and they can't be countered by a lot of their abilities, yeah, it is kind of in their favor. So yeah, I hope I don't make a bunch of people mad with my conclusion. I know there's going to be a bunch of arguments in the comments because people are going to be whipping out all the high balls where people are universal and whatnot. But yeah, that's about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thank you for the love and support. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.